Browns and Steelers play tonight, a historic rivalry that's been pretty much owned by Pittsburgh since 1999. Having said that, the Browns have had some moments in the rivalry, especially since 2020. But in a year where the Browns are essentially heading nowhere and the Steelers are on their way possibly to the AFC North title, is this game really worth anything? And will it be Kevin Stefanski's last game as the Cleveland Browns head coach? I give my thoughts on that. The Cleveland Cavaliers are now 16-1. They did lose to the Celtics in a nail-biting game, but they came back and crushed the New Orleans Pelicans with a lot of men injured in the lineup that night. Plus, I'll give my thoughts on Ohio State and Indiana going into this weekend. As I mentioned, I'm a little nervous about Ohio State, but Indiana's schedule was a little weaker than Ohio State's, and that makes me feel a lot better. And we'll talk a little bit about the standings in the NFL right now and the NBA. It's Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to check out Raw Takes on social media. Facebook, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Instagram at Hoty Raw Takes. And on Twitter, Hoty Andrew. You could find me for more updates on the show and more, including reels, clips from the show, and of course, where you can find Raw Takes on YouTube. Welcome to Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Please make sure to comment below. I want to hear your Raw Takes as you listen to my Raw Takes. You may not agree with me on everything, and that's totally fine. I want to hear what you have to say because the world of sports is a big world after all. So let's get things started with those Cleveland Browns taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers tonight. Usually this game would mean a lot more in the last couple of years, but honestly today it doesn't feel like it means much at all. The Browns are clearly heading nowhere, while the Pittsburgh Steelers are on their way possibly to a division title. Ultimately, what do I think the Browns' keys to the game are? Don't turn the ball over if you're Jameis Winston. Play exactly like you did on Sunday if you're Jameis Winston because you had a damn good game. Try to score above 20 points. That would be a nice thing to do. If you're Pittsburgh, though, you could win games either way. I mean, you clearly took down the Baltimore Ravens, not even scoring a touchdown, and you get in Lamar Jackson's head. Are the Steelers in the Browns' head as much as they are the Ravens? I don't think so. I think it's much more of an even-Steven kind of rivalry in recent years, even though the Pittsburgh Steelers probably do have the advantage in it since 2020, despite the Browns' playoff win back then. But having said that, though, the Pittsburgh Steelers are clearly the better football team. They clearly have the better defense right now. They clearly have better offensive pieces than the Browns right now because they're clicking, sort of. I'm not so sure I'm sold on the Pittsburgh Steelers offense as I am their defense. But having said that, though, the Pittsburgh Steelers are leading this division for a reason. Mike Tomlin is clearly the better coach over Kevin Stefanski right now. And it's going to come down to the wire. And that leads to the coaching question. Will this be Kevin Stefanski's last coaching day as the Browns? I should say last day as the head coach of the Browns, of course. It's possible. I wouldn't be surprised if Jimmy Haslam made the move tomorrow. I'll say this, though. It would be stupid because I don't think Kevin Stefanski is the problem here. As I've mentioned numerous times, Kevin Stefanski should not be on the hot seat. I don't think any of this is his fault, but you kind of have Mike Vrabel waiting in the wings a little bit. I did see him on the sideline on game day against New Orleans, and Kevin Stefanski talked about how the game day role was going to be limited. Is it getting more involved? I don't know. So could Mike Vrabel be the head coach of the Browns by next week? It's possible, but if the Browns win, I think that A, cancels that question, and B, I'm not so sure that Jimmy Haslam's just going to pull the trigger midway through the season. This is a two-time AP Coach of the Year, after all, and I know we could talk about that all we want, but, Kevin Stefanski has not been a great head coach, of course, this season. I can't say that, obviously, with a 2-8 record, but is this his fault? I don't think so. I really, really don't, and I'm going to stick to my guns on it. If the Browns fire Kevin Stefanski, it's stupid, regardless of tonight's result. It really, really is, and I think the Browns would pay the price for it years to come. Having said that, Pittsburgh is a much more stable organization. They're proving why they're the Pittsburgh Steelers just as much as the Baltimore Ravens have proved why they're the Baltimore Ravens. The stability within the divisions come from those two teams. The two longest tenured coaches in the NFL are in Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Mike Tomlin 1, John Harbaugh 2. And that's why I think it would be stupid because the Browns are known for firing coaches, bringing them new in, and that's been their history at least since 2020. And now in 2020, Kevin Stefanski somewhat brings some stability to this franchise. And then you want to just get rid of that after 4 years of more productivity than not. I know he missed the playoffs 2 of those years, but at the same time, that was productive for the most part. There was some injury issues. You're going to put that on Stefanski? We didn't hold Stefanski to that standard. So, yeah, if Kevin Stefanski's not the head coach of the Cleveland Browns tomorrow, depending on today's result, the Browns are stupid. That's just my opinion. They cannot fire Kevin Stefanski if they lose tonight. I think that would be a major issue. Having said that, though, tonight is a big day for talent analysis, where the Browns may stand in a few weeks. The Browns turn things around in the next couple weeks, then we can start to feel better about this team going into 2025. As for the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously a division win would be huge for them. They're trying to keep pace with the Baltimore Ravens and keep that division lead. They already have the tiebreaker with them. They still have yet to play us in Cincinnati, which means there could be possible tiebreaker situations down the line if they lose a game to Cincinnati or us. I think Cincinnati is much more likely to be in the wild card race than we are right now. And I'm not saying Cincinnati's good. They're clearly not, but it's criminal they're not as good as they are with how good Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase have been playing. Having said that, though, yeah, there is some major problems right now with the Cleveland Browns. We all know it. They're not a good football team. Myles Garrett, I'm expecting him to play a lot better than he did against the New Orleans Saints. That was probably the worst game of Myles Garrett's career as a Brown. So I think he will wreak some havoc to Russell Wilson tonight. And maybe Justin Fields if he gets some action as well. I think Myles Garrett could be an X factor for the Browns defense if the Browns end up winning this game. These divisional games always can go either way, and the game is in Cleveland, which leads me to believe the Browns have a shot to pull this one off. Having said that, though, everything about this season leads me to believe they will not pull this off, and the Pittsburgh Steelers should walk away feeling confident that they're going to get an AFC North victory here in Cleveland. Pittsburgh's key obviously will be TJ Watt. Can TJ Watt play like he has all season long on defense? Then they're in business. You obviously look at Najee Harris from the running game perspective, and Pittsburgh has established that running game more so than Cleveland has, despite Nick Chubb coming back. Nick Chubb is due for a big game against the Steelers. He always has a good game against the Steelers. Could it happen tonight? It's possible. That could be an X factor, but I think Najee Harris would be a difference maker in terms of Pittsburgh's offense. Obviously, Russell Wilson, as long as he doesn't turn the ball over, I think we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers putting up a touchdown or two. But this game to me feels like it's going to be a lot of defense, not as much offense. I would say the Steelers win it probably 17-14. And I'll just say, even though it's Pittsburgh week, the buzz in Cleveland right now is not there. And it's just because the Browns stink probably. But it is not there. I mean, this rivalry is huge for people in Cleveland. I know Pittsburgh, it may be a little different because the Ravens have really been their rival since 1999. But here in Cleveland, Pittsburgh is Pittsburgh. We hate them here. Like, this is usually the buzz of the town right now. But it isn't. And the vibe is gone when it comes to the Browns, really. And I think it's shifted over to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think that's going to be really how we feel this game tonight. I don't think there's much excitement for the Browns going into this game. If we win, it would be nice, but what does that really mean? The season's pretty much a wash anyway. I guess we ruined Pittsburgh's chances a little bit. We can feel good about that. That's about it. And maybe Kevin Stefanski keeps his job going into a little bit of a mini bye week if we beat the Steelers. So I'm all in on beating the Steelers. I can't stand the Steelers. I grew up hating the Steelers. So, I'm all in on that, but at the same time, I'm in a position where what does it really mean if we lose to the Steelers, too? Not much, because the season's already a wash. It's tough. It's tough right now to look at the Browns and say, wow, this is what's going on. Having said that, though, this is the Thursday night game. This might be the Browns' only primetime game left of the season. I don't think that Cincinnati game stays on that Thursday night in a few weeks. Obviously, that Sunday night game with the Dolphins probably gets flexed back to 1 o'clock. And, of course, I'm not so sure that Denver game is going to remain on Monday night. That makes me a little nervous, too, because I feel like Denver should probably have that game as well because they're kind of in the mix right now. The Browns really aren't. And so, yeah, I'm not so sure that will mean much either way because the Broncos, as I said in the last edition of Raw Takes, I was kind of ignoring them for a while and wasn't taking them seriously, but now they're in the wild card race pretty significantly. I think we have to keep an eye on the Denver Broncos. They've been pretty quiet and sneaky good. So, yeah, Denver is also another game that will probably get flexed out. So this is probably the only Browns primetime matchup we'll see the rest of the season. Nevertheless, it probably is for the best if you're a Cleveland Browns fan. You really want this team in the spotlight right now. They're awful. They really are. Everything about them stinks. And it's bad because there's some highlight moments like Jameis Winston overall has played really well. The only game he played bad in was the Charger game. He looked good on Sunday. But the Browns, being the Browns, found a way to screw it up. And that's just what happens with the Browns. SOB. Same old Browns. Every time. Having said that, you look at the rest of the NFL standings, obviously Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Cincinnati ahead of Cleveland right now. Pittsburgh, if they win tonight, I think the AFC North is essentially theirs to lose. It probably already is because they beat the Baltimore Ravens. They actually play the Baltimore Ravens before the last week of the season. They have Cincinnati to end the year. So that may be good or bad for the Pittsburgh Steelers, depending on how things go. They have only played one divisional game, too, pretty late in the season. So, yeah, that's pretty big for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well, because they still have to play a lot more division games. We know they've owned Baltimore in recent years. But, yeah, they already had that big win over the Ravens, so that's going to help them significantly. You look at the Ravens right now. They did lose to the Browns and the Steelers in the division, but they've already swept Cincinnati, so they should be in prime position to be a wild card team. The Cincinnati Bengals have already been swept by Baltimore, but they have one win over the Browns. They still have 2 meetings with the Steelers and 1 more with the Browns, and they end the season with the Steelers. So Cincinnati, if they want to kind of come back into the wild card race, I think beating the Steelers twice will be huge for them. They've done it before with Joe Burrow, but because the Steelers' inconsistent nature, well, I should say the Bengals' inconsistent nature, the Steelers have been pretty consistent the entire year. The Bengals' inconsistent nature, I can't just say that the Bengals are going to go out there and look like scrubs against the Steelers, but at the same time, I can't say they're going to beat them. So I think the Steelers have shown more consistency. Mike Tomlin's probably a head coach of the year candidate, by the way, because when do the Steelers ever have a losing record? And already they've exceeded expectations. And they're probably going to win division, in a division that has Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. And I would say Deshaun Watson, but like at this point, do we need to say Deshaun Watson? We know how bad that situation is in Cleveland right now. So, yeah, looking at the AFC North, obviously big for the Steelers as they get into these division games. You look at the Ravens, you look at the Bengals and how they're meshing up in the wild card race. Ravens probably already have it on lockdown, but the Bengals need to catch up, and Baltimore already has that tiebreaker, so a lot could happen within the next few weeks. It looks really good for the Pittsburgh Steelers, though, to clinch the AFC North title, and I would honestly be stunned at this point if they don't win the division. Having said that, though, looking at some of the other teams going on right now in the NFL, Buffalo obviously riding the wave in the AFC East right now. They should have no problems clinching that division. I say they're probably the 2nd seed, maybe the 1 seed if Kansas City loses another game. And Kansas City, when you look at their schedule too, they still have some division games to play. They have 1 more game with the Chargers. They have to play Denver at the end of the year. They have 1 more game with the Raiders too, I believe. But, I mean, the Raiders have been so bad. Is that really a problem? I don't think so. But Denver and the Chargers have proven to be formidable foes right now. They're playing pretty good football. So, yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either way. I mean, Denver had a chance really to beat Denver. Denver had a chance to beat Kansas City, that is, in Arrowhead Stadium, but it didn't happen. So Kansas City is pretty much holding on to that number 1 seed if they lose again. I know they play Houston at some point. That could be a really good football game. I'd love to see C.J. Stroud take it to Patrick Mahomes as well. That would be great. So we'll see what happens with that matchup. But the divisional games are always big because those really could go either way and always seem to do so. And then you look at the South, I really think the Houston Texans have to just have a huge collapse if they're not going to win this division. The Indianapolis Colts are kind of close, but the Colts play Detroit this weekend. That kind of feels like a trap game for the Lions. I'm not going to lie when you look at the NFC, because the Colts may catch some fire and get themselves into the wild card conversation. They're more than capable of. They're well coached. They're a pretty good organization overall. I know they've had their ups and downs in recent years and, you know, the controversy with Jim Irsay, but overall the Colts have been a pretty good organization. So I would not be surprised if the Colts find a way to get to the postseason and maybe trap Detroit this weekend, because I think that's a very strong possibility with how the Colts play football. And they're in the division race too with Houston. And so, yeah, I think that's a possibility. But really, the Houston Texans would have to do a lot because they already have the tiebreaker with Indy to lose that division. It had to be an epic collapse. So I don't see that happening with the Texans. And you look at the NFC, obviously Detroit's leading the way. They play Indy this weekend. As I said, that could be a trap game. Will it be a trap game? I think is questionable. Philadelphia's kind of gotten hot at the right time. I know a lot of people weren't so high on them, but they've won a huge string of football games. Their last loss was to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are still in the race for that division, but are they in a wild card race? The NFC is so weird right now because we have a division where everyone's above 500, but 3 of those teams are exactly 500 in the NFC West. Detroit's obviously leading the way, but honestly, between the Seahawks, Cardinals, 49ers, and Rams, all 4 of those teams look evenly matched. And do you really buy that any one of those 4 teams is going to go and win a playoff game? I'm not so sure. The South I mean, none of those teams look like they can win a playoff game, but they all have highs and lows. The Atlanta Falcons kind of feel fraudulent, but the Atlanta Falcons feel like the best team in that division right now. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've had their low moments with injuries, but when everyone's healthy and the way Baker Mayfield's played this year, could you buy into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I could. The New Orleans Saints with Derek Carr back, could they make some sort of miracle comeback? I think it's possible, but that 7-game losing streak bites you in the butt. And then Carolina's Carolina, obviously. In the East, too, I mean, it's Philadelphia and Washington. Philadelphia right now looks like they're going to run away with it. The Giants and Dallas aren't going anywhere. But between those two teams and the Commanders and the Eagles, yeah, that's going to be a race to the finish. And you look at the NFC North, too, it's a pretty good division. The Minnesota Vikings look really, really good. I don't think anyone thought they were going to be as good as they've been with Sam Darnold, who might be a comeback player of the year candidate. Want to add that in. And I think Kevin O'Connell should also be in the conversation for Coach of the Year with the Vikings. And then you look at the Green Bay Packers. They're still pretty flawed overall, but Green Bay plays everybody tough, and they're always a hard out. So I don't want to play Green Bay. And the Bears are the Bears, but that's a pretty good division too. But Detroit is clearly above and beyond all those teams. So yeah, the NFC race is actually really, really close, and I can't wait to see how that one comes down to the wire, because I think only 3 or 4 teams are essentially out of the playoff race over there in the NFC. I think a lot of teams in the AFC are out of it, and that has to do with really bad football teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars, for example, who currently have the number 1 pick. And Doug Peterson hasn't been fired yet. We've been saying that week after week after week. Obviously, by the end of the season, it probably will happen, but it's due, or we're waiting on that. And it goes back to the Kevin Stefanski theory, too. Is this going to be his last game? Who knows? Tonight, as I said, I'm going to take the Steelers 17-14. I think we get a defensive slugfest of AFC North football, but no, it's not looking good for the Browns because they're just not a good football team, and the Steelers have already proven to be one. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Cleveland Cavaliers and some basketball highlights of the Cleveland Cavaliers taking down New Orleans yesterday. Had a lot of guys hurt, and they were resting, but he still had Donovan Mitchell on the court, and the Cavs just took off and blasted the New Orleans Pelicans after coming off a tight one to the Boston Celtics, which they lost by 3 points. But the Cavs had that as a game the entire way through. They're 16-1. They still have the best record in the NBA, and essentially the Eastern Conference first seed is theirs to lose right now. Just keep playing tough, gritty basketball and get down to the wire. You play the Celtics again in a few weeks in Cleveland, try to get that game back. Yeah, the Cavs are fine. Even if they lost to the Celtics, I wasn't even going to panic. I mean, that game was already a tough one on the schedule to begin with, and in a schedule that's 82 games, you're not going to go 82-0. So, yeah, I think that was fine. I'm not really worried about the Cavs in that essence. The offense is still draining shot after shot after shot. You look at this bench right now. Is it the best bench in the NBA? When you mix in guys, when Max Strus comes back, you look at Dean Wade, you look at Ty Jerome, you look at George Niang, you look at these guys. They have shooters all over the place. They have Donovan Mitchell, your superstar. Darius Garland's looking like a bigger superstar than he was back in the 2021-22 season. You look at Jared Allen, who's clearly a great big man. You look at Evan Mobley, who's absolutely stepped up his game. The Cavs could have 4 All-Stars. I've been saying that for the last couple of years. But really, they could have 4 All-Stars right now on this team. And Kenny Atkinson, who's clearly an NBA Coach of the Year candidate. So the Cavs are rolling on all cylinders still. Having said that, though, when you look at the Boston Celtics and they get fully healthy, when Kristaps Porzingis gets back, yeah, the Boston Celtics probably have the most lethal lineup in the NBA. And then you look out west right now, the Golden State Warriors are really playing fire with fire right now. It feels like 2016 again with how good they are, but I'm still not sold on the Golden State Warriors. They're playing better without Klay Thompson, which was honestly a surprise to me, but that West is loaded. Minnesota should still come back midway through the season. The Denver Nuggets are still out there, and I think Jokic is the best player in the world right now either way. You look at the LA Clippers, and they've kind of had a nice start to the year, but they're still so old. I don't like them in a playoff series. I can't take my money on that. Oklahoma City, when Chet Holmgren comes back, that should be a really good basketball team. The Memphis Grizzlies right now with no Ja Morant has been hurting them, and he's kind of been the force of that team. As long as there's no off-the-court issues going on with Ja, I really like the Memphis Grizzlies overall. And so if he comes back, could the Grizzlies make some sort of postseason push? I think so. The Lakers are playing good to start the year, but they're fraudulent as all hell. I don't even think they're going to win a playoff series. I just think they had a nice open of the year. So the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference are kind of in two different worlds right now. The Milwaukee Bucks, you look at them, they had a disastrous start, but they're starting to slowly figure things up. And obviously the Milwaukee Bucks should make the playoffs, but to me it's coaching. Doc Rivers has got to go. And I'm going to keep saying that with the Milwaukee Bucks. And I'm rooting against them because they've been really a disastrous organization the last few years that have made stupid decisions. So yeah, a lot going on in the East and the West, but the Cavs are still on top of all of it, and they're doing just fine. So yeah, losing to the Celtics didn't make me panic. And honestly, the fact that they beat the New Orleans Pelicans in blowout fashion with a lot of their stars off the court doesn't concern me at all. The Cavs are going to be just fine with a Coach of the Year candidate and 4 superstar players potentially on this roster that we may see meet the All-Star game. With a bench that may be one of the best benches in the NBA, this team right now, as it currently stands, I would take them to beat the New York Knicks in a 7-game series. I really would. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the Cavs. All right, Ohio State. They play Indiana this week. And so Ohio State needs to beat Indiana, obviously. You don't want a 2-loss season when it comes to the 12-team format. If Indiana wins, it wouldn't surprise me because Indiana's been so good this year, and Kurt Stefanski already getting that extension. So Indiana is clearly in good shape. The Hoosiers are still a tough out for the Buckeyes. Why I'm nervous about this week when it comes to the Buckeyes is that I think the Indiana Hoosiers are just better coached, really. I think it's going to be a coaching duel between Kurt Stefanski and Ryan Day. And because I think Ryan Day's much more of a liability, I would give Indiana the edge in terms of coaching. Having said that, in terms of talent, Ohio State should have no problems whatsoever. Obviously, losing McLaughlin may be big for the Buckeyes going into this week, and because they have Michigan next week. But Michigan's unranked. They should have no problems with Michigan, but who knows with Ryan Day at the helm. So, yeah, I think it's going to be huge for Ohio State to grind out this win. Indiana's not going to make it easy. They've had a well beyond successful season. It's going to be a grind for the Buckeyes in this one. And I think it's going to be close. And the big thing that scares me is Indiana blew out Nebraska and Ohio State struggled with them. But we could say Ohio State maybe was looking ahead to Penn State, but still, that's a problem to me. Having said that too, though, Ohio State in the last 3 games has only allowed 1 offensive touchdown. So defensively, they're clicking on all cylinders. Only 1 offensive touchdown. Will Howard's pick 6 in Penn State was the other touchdown they've allowed. But still, 1 offensive touchdown against Northwestern, who took an early 7-0 lead, and then you blew them out 31-7. The Buckeyes should be fine. Having said that, though, I kind of like the edge here with Indiana. Something about the Buckeyes just makes me nervous from a coaching perspective. So I think it's possible Indiana takes this game, and Ohio State is sitting at a 9-2 record with the pressure on them to beat Michigan. And if they lose to Michigan, too, which is still possible because Michigan has the edge in the series, at least since 2021, yeah, I think the Buckeyes probably failed to make the 12-team playoff, and obviously they wouldn't make the Big Ten championship. But they got to get to that Big Ten championship because they need to get revenge on Oregon. I think that would be huge for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And Oregon's had their number the last couple of years. And to be fair, I think Oregon's the better program right now. I really think if we're talking about who's going to win the national title right now, I would pick Oregon. I just think they're the best team in college football. But the 12-team format's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. And as the college football season comes down to the wire, I'm excited to see what takes place. Now, to wrap things up before we go, obviously tune into Short Take Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, where I'll give some brief thoughts, obviously, after the Ohio State-Indiana game. I'll give my thoughts on that, and also some of the slate of NFL games going into the week and the NBA and all that. I want to talk briefly about the Major League Baseball awards. Tarek Skubal obviously running away with the Cy Young. Emmanuel Clase, the closer here in Cleveland, was in consideration for the award, but obviously I'm not surprised by that. It's really hard for a closer to win that award, which is fine by me. Skubal had a terrific season, and it also makes me feel better that he did win the Cy Young on this extent because he gave up that Lane Thomas grand slam in the postseason. So I'm glad Tarek Skubal won the Cy Young. He's a fun player to watch, and I think the Tigers are going to be really, really good for the next couple of years. Makes me a little bit nervous about my Cleveland Guardians, though, but I'm going to have to head up to Detroit and watch the Tigers play the Guardians, too. I think that's going to be one hell of a rivalry the next couple of years, because really when we talk about baseball rivalries, one that I think is going to be kind of underrated when we look at things down the line is this Guardians-Tigers rivalry. And it's because it's some mid-market teams, yada, yada, yada. I still think that'll be a very fun rivalry for years to come, seeing that the Guardians are really good and the Tigers are really good. And also, you look at Manager of the Year, Stephen Vogt. Congratulations to him here in Cleveland. We should celebrate that. He had a terrific season. And now with Terry Francona becoming the Reds manager, seeing him back in baseball, obviously we have very fond memories of him here, but it looks like we're in really the right direction with Stephen Vogt at the helm. And we did trade Eli Morgan to the Cubs. Eli Morgan, I think, was a solid bullpen pitcher, but we still have a lot of great arms in there. I think we're going to start to look at developing Cade Smith to maybe be the closer because of Emmanuel Clase's faults in the postseason, even though he had a terrific regular season, don't get me wrong. So I'm excited to see what happens, and the future does look bright for a lot of teams, including the Guardians and Tigers. But yeah, congrats to Stephen Vogt, congrats to Tarek Skubal, and Emmanuel Clase, even though he didn't win the Cy Young, still a great season. That's it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Like, comment, and subscribe below. You may not agree with me on everything, but if you have your own thoughts, please let me know. I want to hear them right down there. And of course, follow the show on social media. All the social media links are below too in the description, so make sure to check those out. I'll be back with Short Takes Saturday this weekend. Have a good one, everybody. I'm Andrew Hoty, and those are my Raw Takes.